Hello, Alya. Shall we read the rest of the book then? This is what the book looks like. So, and we have come to the 8th chapter. The Pig Baby. Would you like to hear about Alice's visit to the Duchess? It was a very interesting visit indeed, I can assure you. Of course, she knocked at the door to begin with, but nobody came. So she had to open it for herself. Now, if you look at the picture, you'll see exactly what Alice saw when she got inside. I shall show you. She doesn't look very nice, does she? No, she looks very grumpy. The door led right into the kitchen, you see. The Duchess sat in the middle of the room, nursing the baby. The baby was howling. The soup was boiling. The cook was stirring in the soup. The cat, it was a Cheshire cat, was grinning, as Cheshire cats always do. All these things were happening just as Alice went in. The Duchess has a beautiful cap and gown, hasn't she? But I'm afraid she hasn't got a very beautiful face. The baby, well, I dare say you've seen several nicer babies than that, and more good-tempered ones too. However, take a good look at it, and we'll see if you know it again next time you meet it. So let's have another look at the picture. Like that, now you can see. Not a very nice lady, not a very sweet baby either, or a lovely cat. But this is what stories is about. They change. Okay, let's continue. The cook. Well, you might have seen nicer cooks as well, once or twice in your life. But I'm nearly sure you've never seen a nicer cat, now have you? And wouldn't you like to have a cat of your own, just like that one, with lovely green eyes and smiling so sweetly? The Duchess was very rude to Alice, and no wonder. Why, she even called her own baby Pig. And it wasn't a pig, was it? And she ordered the cook to chop off Alice's head, though, of course, the cook didn't do it. And at last she threw the baby at her. So Alice caught the baby and took it away with her, and I think that was about the best thing she could do. So she wandered away through the wood, carrying the ugly little thing with her. And the great job it was to keep hold of it. It wriggled about so. But at least she found out that the proper way was to keep tight hold of its left foot and its right ear. But don't you try to hold on to a baby like that, my child. There are not many babies that like being nursed in that way. Well, and so the baby kept grunting and grunting, so that Alice had to say to it quite seriously, "If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear, I'll have nothing more to do with you. Mind now." And at last she looked down into its face, and what do you think had happened to it? Well, look at the picture and see if you can guess. Why, that's not the baby that Alice was nursing, is it? I knew you wouldn't know it again, though I told you to take a good look at it. Yes, it is the baby, and it has turned into a little pig. So Alice put it down and let it trot away into the wood. And she said to herself, it was a very ugly baby, but it makes rather a handsome pig, I think. Don't you think she was right? All alone, poor Alice, no baby, not even a pig to keep her company. So you may be sure she was very glad indeed when she saw the Cheshire cat perched up in a tree over her head. The cat has a very nice smile, no doubt, but just look what a lot of teeth it's got. Isn't Alice just a little shy of it? I had to peek in. I had to look. I'll show you soon. Well, yes, a little shy, but then it couldn't help having teeth, you know, and it could have helped smiling, supposing it had been cross. So on the whole, she was glad. Doesn't Alice look very prim, holding her head up straight and with her hands behind her, just as if she were going to say her lessons to the cat? Yes, that is Alice and that is the cat, a Cheshire cat. And that reminds me, there is a little lesson I want to teach you while we were looking at this picture of Alice and the cat. Now don't be in a bad temper about it, my dear child. It's a very little lesson indeed, so careful. Do you see that foxglove growing close to the tree? The foxglove, I think, is there. And do you know why it's called a foxglove? Perhaps you think it's got something to do with a fox? No, indeed. Foxes never wear gloves. The right word is folksgloves. Did you ever hear that fairies used to be called the good folk? Now we're finished the lesson and we'll wait a minute till you got your temper back again. Well, do you feel quite good-natured again now? No temper ache? No crossness about the corners of the mouth? Then we'll go on. Cheshire Puss, said Alice. Wasn't that a pretty name for a cat? Would you tell me which way I ought to go from here? And so the Cheshire Cat told her which way she ought to go if she wanted to visit the Hatter, and which way to go to visit the March Hare. They're both mad, said the cat. And then the cat vanished away, just like the flame of a candle when it goes out. So Alice set off to visit the March Hare, and as she went along there was the cat again. And she told it she didn't like it coming and going so quickly. So this time the cat vanished quite slowly, beginning with a tail and ending with a grin. A new picture. See how it's vanishing? You can nearly not see the face. Wasn't that a curious thing? A grin without any cat. Would you like to see one? If you turn up the corner of this leaf, you'd have Alice looking at the grin, and she doesn't look a bit more frightened than when she was looking at the cat, does she? No, Alice is never frightened. This is the Mad Tea Party. You will see Alice had left the Cheshire Cat and had gone off to see the March Hare and the Hatter, as the Cheshire Cat had advised her, and she found them having tea under a great tree, with a dormouse sitting between them. There were only those three at the table, but there were quantities of teacups set all along it. You can't see all the table, you know, and even in the bit you can see there are 9 cups, counting the one on the March Hare had got in his hand. That's the March Hare, with the long ears and straws mixed up with his hair. The straws showed he was mad. I don't know why. Never twist up straws among your hair, for fear people could think you're mad. There. There was a nice green armchair at the end of the table that looked as if it was just meant for Alice. So she went and sat down in it. Then she had quite a long talk with the March Hare and the Hatter. The Dormouse didn't say much. You see, it was fast asleep generally, and it only just woke up for a moment now and then. As long as it was asleep, it was very useful to the March Hare and the Hatter, because it had a nice round soft head, just like a pillow, so they could put their elbows on it and lean across it and talk to each other quite comfortably. You wouldn't like people to use your head for a pillow, would you? But if you were fast asleep like the dormouse, you wouldn't feel it, so I suppose you wouldn't care about it. I'm afraid they gave Alice very little to eat and drink. However, after a bit, she helped herself to some tea and bread and butter. Only I don't quite see where she got the bread and butter, and she had no plate for it. Nobody seems to have a plate except the Hatter. I believe the March Hare must have had one as well, because when they all moved one place on, that was the rule at this curious tea party, and Alice had to go into the place of the March Hare, she found she had just upset the milk jug into its plate. So, I suppose his plate and the milk jug are hidden behind that large teapot. The Hatter used to carry about his hats to sell, and even the one that he's got on his head is meant to be sold. You see, it's got its price marked on it, a 10 and a 6. That means 10 shillings and 6 pence. Wasn't that a funny way of selling hats? And hasn't he got a beautiful necktie on? Such a lovely yellow tie with large red spots. He has just got up to say to Alice, "Your hair wants cutting." That was a rude thing to say, wasn't it? And you think that her hair does want cutting? I think it's very pretty length, just the right length. Another look at the picture. You can see the hat with the price on, and you can see Alice's pretty hair, and you can see that mouse they had between them. This is a little bit of the beautiful garden I told you about on the next picture. You see, Alice had managed at last to get quite small so that she could go through the little door. I suppose she was about as tall as a mouse, if it stood on its hind legs. So, of course, this was a very tiny rose tree, and these are very tiny gardeners. What funny little men they are. But are they men, do you think? I think they might be live cards. With just a head and arms and legs, so as to look like little men. And what are they doing with that red paint, I wonder? Well, you see, this is what they told Alice. The Queen of Hearts wanted to have a red rose tree, just in that corner. And these poor little gardeners had made a great mistake, and they had put it in a white one instead. And they were so frightened about it because the Queen was sure to be angry, and then she would order all their heads to be cut off. She was a dreadfully savage queen, and that was the way she always did when she was angry with people. Off with their heads! They didn't really cut their heads off, you know, because nobody ever obeyed her. But that was what she always said. Now, can't you guess what the poor little gardeners are trying to do? They're trying to paint the roses red, and they're in a great hurry to get it done before the Queen comes. And then perhaps the Queen won't find out it was a white rose tree to begin with, and then perhaps the little men won't get their heads cut off. Yes, now you see, again, they are painting the roses. You see, there were 5 large white roses on the tree. Such a job to get them all painted red. But they got 3.5 done now. And if only they wouldn't stop talking. Work away, little men. Do work away. Or the queen will be coming before it's done. And if she finds any white roses on the tree, do you know what will happen? It will be, off with their heads! Oh, work away, my little men. Hurry, hurry. The queen has come, and isn't she angry? Oh, my poor little Alice. Did you ever play a croquet? There are large wooden balls painted with different colors that you have to roll about, and arches of wire that you have to send them through, and great wooden mallets with long handles to knock the balls about with. Now look at the picture, and you will see that Alice has just been playing a game of croquet. But she couldn't play with that great red what's-its-name in her arms. Why? How could she hold a mallet? Why, my dear child, that great red what's-its-name, its real name is a flamingo, is the mallet. In this croquet game, white balls were live hedgehogs, you know. A hedgehog can roll itself up into a ball, and the mallets were live flamingos. So Alice is just resting from the game for a minute to have a chat with that dear old thing, the Duchess. And of course she keeps her mallet under her arm so as not to lose it. But I don't think she was a dear old thing, one bit, to call her baby a pig and to want to chop off Alice's head. Oh, that was only a joke about chopping off Alice's head. And as to the baby, why, it was a pig, you know. And just look at her smile. Why, it's wider than all Alice's head, and yet you can only see half of it. Well, they'd only had a very little chat when the queen came and took Alice away to see the griffon and the mock turtle. You don't know what the griffon is? Well, do you know anything? Anything at all? That's the question. However, look at the picture. That creature with a red head and red claws and green scales, that is the griffon. Now you know. So, I say that is it. So that's a griffon. Next time you meet a griffon and a mock turtle, I dare say they'll dance it for you if you ask them prettily. Only don't let them come quite close, or they will be treading on your toes, as they did on poor Alice's, because they got quite big feet. And the mock turtle have very sharp claws. Did you ever hear how the Queen of Hearts made some tarts? And can you tell me what became of them? Why, of course I can. Doesn't the song tell all about it? The Queen of Hearts, she made some tarts, and all on a summer day. The Knave of Hearts, he stole those tarts and took them quite away. Well, yes, the song says so, but it would never do to punish the poor knave just because there was a song about him. They had to take him prisoner and put chains on his wrists and bring him before the King of Hearts so that there might be a regular trial. Now, if you look at the big picture at the beginning of this book, you'll see what a grand thing a trial is when the judge is a king. Where is that picture then? I'll have to look, see if I can find it. Oh, yes. There. That's the trial. And you can see the king is the judge. The king is very grand, isn't he? But he doesn't look very happy. I think that big crown on the top of his wig must be very heavy and uncomfortable. But he had to wear them both, you see, so that people might know he was a judge and the king. And doesn't the queen look cross? She can see the dish of tarts in the table that she had taken such trouble to make. And she can see the bad knave. Do you see the chains hanging from his wrists? I'll show you later. Just remember. That stole them away from her. So I don't think it's any wonder if he does feel a little cross. She does feel a little cross. The white rabbit is standing near to the king, reading out the song to tell everybody that what the bad knave he is. And the jury, you can just see two of them up in the jury box. The frog and the duck, they have to settle whether he is guilty or not guilty. Now if you tell you about the accident that happened to Alice. You see, she was sitting close by the jury box and she was called as a witness. You know what a witness is. A witness is somebody who has seen the prisoner do whatever they say that he is accused of, or at any rate knows something that is important in the trial. But Alice hadn't seen the queen make the tarts, and she hadn't seen the knave take the tarts, and in fact she didn't know anything about it. So why in the world they wanted her to be a witness? I'm sure I can't tell you. Anyhow, they did want her, and the white rabbit blew his big trumpet and shouted out, "Alice!" And so Alice jumped up in a great hurry, and then what do you think happened? Why, her skirt caught against the jury box and tipped it over, and all the poor little jurors came tumbling out of it. Let's try if we can make out all the 12. You don't. You know, we ought to be 12 to make up a jury. I'll come here. There. Can you see the frog? I can see a duck. Well, it's hard to see the picture and tell you what is there, so I will just read on. I see the frog and the dormouse and the rat and the ferret and the hedgehog and the lizard and the bantam cock and the mole and the duck and the squirrel and the screaming bird with a long beak just behind the mole. But that only makes 11. We must find one more creature. Oh, do you see a little white head coming out behind the mole and just under the duck's beak? That makes up the 12. Mr. Tenniel says the screaming bird is a storkling. Of course you know what that is. And the little white head is a mouseling. Isn't it, the little darling? Alice picked them all up again, very carefully, and I hope they weren't much hurt. Oh dear, what is it all about? And what's happening to Alice? Yeah, what's happening? Well, I'll tell you all about it as well. I can. The way the trial ended was this. The king wanted the jury to settle whether the knave of hearts was guilty or not guilty. That means that they were to settle whether he had stolen the tarts or if somebody else had taken them. But the wicked queen wanted to have his punishment settled first of all. That wasn't at all fair, was it? Because, you know, supposing he never took the tarts, then of course he oughtn't to be punished. Would you like to be punished for something you hadn't done? So Alice said, "Stuff and nonsense." So the queen said, "Off with her head." Just what she always said when she was angry. So Alice said, "Who cares for you? You're nothing but a pack of cards." So they were all very angry and flew up into the air and came tumbling down again all over Alice, just like a shower of rain. And I think you'll never guess what happened next. The next thing was Alice woke up out of her curious dream, and she found that the cards were only some leaves of a tree that the wind had blown upon her face. Wouldn't it be a nice thing to have a curious dream just like Alice? Best plan is this. First lay down under a tree and wait until a white rabbit runs by with a watch in his hand. Then shut your eyes and pretend to be dear little Alice. Goodbye, Alice dear. Goodbye, Alya dear. The end.